Imagine a moment where Somalia and Somaliland finally agree to sit at the same table for real, structured, and serious negotiations. A moment the Horn of Africa has been waiting for, a moment that could reshape political realities, alliances, and honestly, the future of millions of people. Today we explore a big question. What if Somalia and Somaliland went to negotiations, and who would have the advantage? Not from emotion, not from nationalism, but from a clear geopolitical lens. To understand any advantage, we must begin with history. Somalia and Somaliland share language, culture, and deep social ties, but politically, their paths diverged sharply after the collapse of the Somali state in 1991. Somaliland declared independence and built its own government, constitution, and institutions. Somalia, meanwhile, went through decades of internal conflict, clan divisions, and attempts to rebuild a central government. For over 30 years, the two sides have disagreed fundamentally about their relationship. Somalia sees Somaliland as a region within its sovereign borders, while Somaliland sees itself as a fully independent republic. That difference alone shapes every negotiation attempt. Past dialogues failed because both sides entered the room with immovable red lines. Somalia refuses to negotiate independence. Somaliland refuses to negotiate unity. Any negotiation built on two opposite destinations cannot succeed unless the approach changes. This history, and the emotions connected to it, follow both sides whenever negotiations are discussed. Now let's look at the current landscape. Somalia enters negotiations with the international advantage. It is recognized globally as a sovereign state. It has a seat at the United Nations, at the African Union, and in major diplomatic forums. These give Somalia formal power, the kind of power that shapes international narratives and legal positioning. Somalia also has support from influential global partners, including Turkey, Qatar, the United States, and the European Union. These alliances matter because negotiations are never purely local. They are influenced by global interests. However, Somalia still struggles internally with issues like security threats from al-Shabaab, federal state disagreements, clan tensions, and political instability. These challenges can weaken Somalia's negotiating focus because leaders must constantly balance internal pressures with external diplomacy. Somaliland, on the other hand, comes with a different type of strength: internal stability. For more than 3 decades, Somaliland has built functioning governance, peaceful transitions of power, a working parliament, relatively strong security, and democratic elections. Even countries that do not officially recognize Somaliland often praise its stability. So, this stability actually becomes a kind of negotiating power. Even if international actors don't, legally recognize it, they still acknowledge its performance. In a way, it's like the stability itself turns into a source of influence. Somaliland, for example, maintains strong ties with Ethiopia, the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, and more, with the Gulf region, the Berbera Corridor, its partnerships with DP World, and its growing strategic importance all give Somaliland leverage that isn't really based on recognition. It's more about performance, and honestly, its location. Economic and strategic factors, also shape who has the advantage in negotiations. Somalia, for instance, has enormous long-term potential. With the longest coastline in mainland Africa, a wealth of untapped marine resources, fertile land, and a large population, Somalia's economic future could be really significant. International financial institutions are already supporting Somalia's debt relief, economic reforms, and infrastructure growth. This potential gives Somalia future leverage. Countries invest where the future is big. Somaliland, meanwhile, has immediate strategic value. The Berbera port is emerging as a major commercial and military interest point for global powers. Its location along the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, which, by the way, is one of the world's busiest maritime corridors, makes it essential for shipping, logistics, and security. At a time when the region is becoming more militarized and contested, Somaliland's position becomes even more important. This gives Somaliland strong geopolitical leverage today, not in the future. Public opinion in both areas also matters. Negotiations are never just between leaders, they are shaped by the emotions, identity, and expectations of the people. In Somalia, the majority of citizens believe Somaliland is part of the country. Any leader who appears to, concede territory risks political pressure, backlash, or even accusations of betrayal. In Somaliland, the overwhelming majority of citizens support independence. Their identity is really tied to the idea that Somaliland is a separate nation. Leaders cannot easily compromise or appear weak on this issue. This means, honestly, both sides enter negotiations with intense domestic pressure, making compromise difficult and sometimes politically dangerous. International players also influence the outcome. The African Union wants peace and stability between the two. Ethiopia wants access to reliable ports and predictable neighbors, especially after recent tensions in the region. The Gulf states want port influence and strategic positioning on the Red Sea. So, Western countries, they really want stability, good governance, and protection of shipping routes. None of these actors, honestly, fully take sides, but all of them have their own interests. Somalia, for instance, offers legal recognition and international legitimacy. On the other hand, Somaliland brings security, stability, and a pretty strategic geography to the table. This creates a rare situation. Global actors actually see value in both, but for different reasons. So if the two sides entered negotiations today, who would have the advantage? Well, the answer isn't simple, because each side has a different type of advantage. Diplomatically, Somalia has the upper hand. It's recognized, it controls the narrative internationally, and it has institutional support. On-the-ground reality, however, gives Somaliland an upper hand. It controls its territory peacefully, governs effectively, and does not rely on international forces for stability. Psychologically, Somaliland has an advantage because it can walk away from talks without losing daily function. It already behaves as an independent state. Somalia, however, cannot walk away easily because the unity of the state is a core national principle. This makes negotiations more sensitive for Somalia and gives Somaliland more flexibility in the negotiation room. But real negotiations require moving away from zero-sum thinking. Neither side can expect total victory. Practical cooperation must come first. That means working together on airspace management, security coordination, trade routes, passport arrangements, and shared economic projects. These practical steps create trust and reduce tensions. Only after trust is built can both sides talk about long-term political questions, whether recognition, partnership, or special administrative arrangements. The Horn of Africa today is facing shifting alliances, competition over ports, regional rivalries, and global military interests. If Somalia and Somaliland chose diplomacy over confrontation, both could gain economically, strategically, and socially. Peaceful negotiation would strengthen regional stability, attract investment, and create new opportunities for ordinary citizens. The question of advantage becomes less important when both sides benefit more from stability than from conflict. In reality, the future of millions depends not on who wins negotiations, but on whether negotiations happen at all, and whether leaders choose dialogue over pride. If Somalia and Somaliland ever sit down for serious, honest, future-focused negotiations, it could become one of the most important diplomatic events in the modern history of the Horn of Africa.